Let's start with number 3 from homework 27. Remember when we came up with a list of perfect squares? All the blue numbers are perfect squares, from 1 squared being 1 all the way up to 15 squared being 225. We want to know which of these numbers have perfect squares as factors and what's the biggest perfect square that goes into the number that's under the radical. Maybe 32 is not a perfect square, but there could be a perfect square that goes into 32 that would help us to break this down a little bit. So we look at our perfect squares list. I see that, 16 is the biggest perfect square, I think it's the biggest, that goes into 32. You know, 4 also goes into 32, but it's not the biggest perfect square, and it's not going to get you the most simplified answer. So we can rewrite square root 32 as a product of square root 16 times square root 2. Is square root 16 times square root 2, is that indeed the same as square root 32? Yes, it is. So then we break it down further. What is the square root of 16? It's 4. What's the square root of 2? Some weird decimal. And since I want the exact answer, I don't want the decimal, I'm going to leave it as square root 2. This is my final answer for simplifying square root 32. A very, very common error that I see and that I saw yesterday on the test was this. That once we've broken down square root 32 to be square root 16 times square root 2, we break down square root 16, but we leave the radical on top. Square root 16 is not square root 4. Square root 16 is 4. If you change it to square root 4, that's going to change it to 2, and we know that the square root of 16 isn't 2. So don't feel bad if you made this error. It's a very common one, but make sure you watch out for what can I take the square root of and what do I leave under the square root.